This week on Better Bad Ideas, we are joined by Congressman Pete Stauber, representing the 8th Congressional District in Minnesota, a former police officer and now a legislator, a pro-union Republican who embraces working bipartisan. If you're interested in how labor legislation works in this country and how unions organize more workers, stick to this episode. Let's get into it.
I'm Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Put your helmets on, buckle your chin straps. It's a full contact sport.
We're going to find out who has a better bad idea. There's a great story with Pete and I, right? How we met. We were in the Delta Lounge and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him and I go, this guy looks fucking familiar. And I think you were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And then we were both drinking Bud Lights or we were drinking a beer on our way back to our respective homes. And then we just started talking, right?
Yep.
And that was a great introduction to Congressman Pete Stauber.
Yeah.
How's that go?
It's always good, better with a beer.
Oh, so then we had another funny thing is we had the congressional meeting after the election.
In Emmer's office.
Emmer's office. So we're having a great meeting with all Republican congressmen trying to build this coalition of labor and, you know, this kind of working families, you know, Republicans embracing working families. And you've been obviously extremely supportive of that. So it's like a meet and greet, just very informal. And they're asking all kinds of questions and we're going back and forth. And I think Emma gave us all hockey pucks or something, if I remember correctly. And they asked me, what is your favorite American-made product? And I looked at him and I go, Bud Light. Do you remember that? Which is great. So what is it like being in Congress after the November elections?
Well, it's obviously with President Trump back in, it was, you know, there's a different feeling. There's a different giddy up in our step. And, you know, from all industries, that we've met with, they're really excited, you know, about the opportunities to make the Tax Cut and Jobs Act permanent, to bring industry back, onshore industry, permitting changes. I tell you what, Sean, it's just the opportunities right now that we have within reconciliation. The Rules Committee is meeting as we speak, and so that reconciliation piece is going to be a big first start for Trump 47, and it's going to benefit all Americans.
So, you know, it's funny. There's a lot of criticism out there, obviously, with the aggressive approach to putting tariffs on all these countries and, you know, DOGE and everything else. And you come from a pretty liberal state, Minnesota. What has been the response, not only of your constituency being Republican, but also Democratic?
So, you know, the divisiveness in politics, Sean, it's real. And I can say it's real and at the same time it's unfortunate, right? Because we want to move the country ahead. We want the blue-collar, middle-class American family to succeed. This is what the country was built on. We've always talked about that.
We have.
It's so important. And I think that if we can put politics aside, and I'm going to give you an example. I'm on transportation and infrastructure. My predecessor, Congressman Jim Oberstar, was a transportation chair from Minnesota. Spent 36 years in this town as member of Congress. He said there's no Democrat road or Republican road. There are roads for us all. And I look at it as I view, as we go into this new Congress, there's a left ditch and a right ditch. Sean, you can go in that. You can drive those ditches.
I hope they never get out of those ditches. To be honest with you, some of those people.
But the America's between the guardrails. That's right. My analogy on transportation infrastructure. America is between the guardrails, and you have to have legislation that fits in between the guardrails. And that's exactly what I've done. Every piece of legislation that I've had has had bipartisan support. I think that's what needs to happen more. And just through the sphere of influence, I try to work that because I truly believe that Democrats love this country just as much as I do. They just have a different philosophy or different view on how to make us even better. That's all.
But the different philosophy is what the Democratic Party wanted 20 years ago, which is actually happening right now. If you look at old videos, 1996, one sticks out in my mind right now, and it's because, you know, it's funny, like I'm obsessed with some of the positions that are being taken from the far left and the far right. But if you look at the immigration policy, right, and you look at, you know, politicians like Schumer, Clintons, the Obamas, they all talked about how we have an immigration problem. They all talked about how government's too big. They all talked about, especially Schumer. I just recently watched a video of Senator Schumer when he was actually holding up a board, because we didn't have all this fancy internet stuff, a graph showing how the disparity in the China trade is crushing jobs in this country. And now we've actually, or the administration and people like yourself and some other Democratic people are embracing this change. But, you know, that was a Democratic philosophy and or platform 20 years ago. Why are they so against everything right now?
Well, I'm just going to talk about Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. That used to be blue, it's all red now. I've had folks that have voted Democrat their entire life will not vote for Democrat ever again.
Well, I think it's that's a great point you make, because your last 3 or 4 elections, you've had opposition from the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which is affiliated with the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And each time your percentage of your winnings have grown. You were almost won by 60%, I believe, your last election.
Yeah,
and I think your first election, you won just about 50%.
Yeah, 52, I think. But the fact of the matter is I've received more votes in Minnesota's 8th Congressional District than any other member of Congress.
244,000, I think, last time, right?
Good for you. And Jim Oberstar had 242,000. That was his highest. So what we're doing is we're representing the blue collar families. And what I'm talking about is those people that work on our harbor, those people that work in our mines. Mining is critical for northeastern Minnesota.
And mining got shut off under the last administration, right?
Joe Biden was the most anti-mining president in the history of this country. He not only took leases away from a mining company, but he banned mining 225,000 acres. Now, for your listeners, Sean, we have in northeastern...
There are listeners today.
What's that?
There are listeners today.
Okay, for our listeners today. Yes. For our listeners today, I want you to understand northeastern Minnesota has the biggest untapped copper nickel find in the world. Copper, nickel, platinum group metals, palladium group metals, cobalt. We have the opportunity to help secure a strategic nest.
So where are we getting all these products right now?
We're getting them from China.
So what does that look like if we can actually bring all that work back, start mining? What does that look like for jobs, American jobs in this country?
First off, they're all union jobs on the Iron Range, good paying jobs. We cannot allow China, who controls 86% of all the critical minerals. They use child slave labor, and in the Congo, 15 of those 19 industrial mines are owned by the Chinese Communist Party, and they use child slave labor. It's unconscionable. The United States of America, Sean, should never buy 1 ounce of minerals from China. When we have it here in our country, we have the best environmental laws, best labor laws, and we are blessed with this under our feet.
And we'll never run out of it.
No, why would we not do it here in the United States of America? And that's where the Biden administration faulted big time. Not only oil and gas, Sean, but critical minerals.
So why did we allow the import of all these minerals from China? What was behind that? What was the theory or thought process? Was it pure money and greed, or what was it?
I think I use this, and I didn't coin this phrase, but many people wanted to export our environmental guilt. So as long as they were mining in other countries and not in our country, we'll take the minerals for our green EVs, we'll take the cobalt for our batteries, etc. And to me, that was the wrong way to look at it. We know that we can do it here. We can do it better. It will help our economy. We can domestically build. I mean, I've talked about we can mine here. With the right permitting, we can mine here, we can process here, we can manufacture here. Sean, those are good American jobs, and nobody's going to tell me we can't bring some of these major manufacturers back to our communities, and that's what the President Trump is doing and will do. And we're going to see the benefit of this.
Especially when you have, such a thirst for technology. I mean, you see the Democratic Party and a lot of other folks, even a lot of Republicans, have embraced technology, artificial intelligence. We're fighting a battle every single day regarding autonomous vehicles, autonomous commercial vehicles. And, here we have an opportunity because there are going to be jobs lost by technology. Luckily, we get the ability as a union to negotiate terms and conditions and create new jobs as a result of technology. But with all this technology coming fast and furious, would it make sense to bring a lot of these jobs like mining, manufacturing back here? Because whatever we're going to lose for technology, there should be a backfill with the ability to produce goods and services within this country.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have said it better than how you just described it.
I probably could not repeat that again, but it sounded good, right?
It was, but you're right. I mean, we have the ability to do it. Why don't we do it here? Why don't we use the American technology? Why don't we use our labor? Why don't we use our workforce? Why don't we use our technology? It's a challenge.
I've got a theory on
Go ahead.
that, okay? I got a theory on, let's say a perfect world lines up. We get all these jobs back here. And in the far left and the critics of this tariff and the critics of anything that's going on in this country, I mean, we're focused on, as a union, and we're focused on America is creating American jobs. What you have here is, if we can bring this stuff back, people are going to be upset thinking that all the cost, the higher labor costs in the United States is going to be passed on to the consumer. I got a bad idea. If we could actually take the disparity in CEO and executive pay and bring it down and not have to pass on the cost to consumers and create upper middle class jobs or middle class jobs. And instead of CEOs making $28 million a year and all their executives getting all these big bonuses, maybe they get $15 million a year. And maybe their bonuses are a lot less than they were, but they're still making money. I think corporate greed has a lot to do with the pushback on a lot of these tariffs as well.
This episode is brought to you by Catches Law Group, proud advocates for injured workers and their families since 1986. If you've been hurt on the job, navigating the workers' comp system can feel like fighting an uphill battle. That's where Catches Law comes in. They've recovered over $3 billion for hardworking people just like you. And they don't back down when your rights are on the line. They know what it means to stand shoulder to shoulder with unions and workers across the country. Because at Catches Law, it's not just about compensation, it's about justice. Learn more at catcheslaw.com. That's KECHES law.com. And I've got to tell you, I've had the privilege to work side by side with Catches Law Group. I've seen the tenacity they show when they're representing injured workers. They are passionate, they represent you with courage and conviction, and they always get you and your family the best result. Check out catcheslaw.com. That's KECHES law.com.
What President Trump is trying to do, first off, the United States of America holds 73% of tariff debt across the world. 73% we absorb. And the president says that's not going to happen anymore. We know that we can compete. Our small businesses, our manufacturers, our farmers, Sean, can compete with anybody in the world. Just make it fair. We know we live in a global world, okay? But let's make sure that when companies want to reshore or they want to start manufacturing, for example, they want to look at the United States of America first because of our tax policy, because of our workforce, because of our
think about our universities and colleges.
What's that?
Think about all the universities and colleges that we have. We have an untapped resource of talent in this country, and it should signify when you have everybody coming from other countries to the United States to get educated. Shouldn't that tell you something? Let's use the untapped resources that we have in this country. I mean, I'm from Massachusetts and I'm from Boston, right? And we have in a 5 square mile radius the best and brightest universities and colleges in the country with tremendous talent.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the opportunity, when people, I'll say this, when people are not in the workforce, First off, they don't understand the dignity and appreciate the dignity of a job. And we in society lose their time, treasure, and talents because every one of our listeners today has something they can contribute to our community or our society. And I'm going to change gears. That's exactly why we're putting work requirements in on Medicaid. Everybody has value. Every human being has value, Sean, that can go get a job because the dignity in a job is so important.
So you're suggesting, I guess, in that statement that, look, we have no issue with Medicaid, but there's got to be skin in the game, so to speak?
Absolutely. We know that. We know right now the Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, said that if we put forth work requirements, it will save the federal government $200 to $400 billion.
But Congressman, what if I'm not able to work? What if I'm legitimately one of those people that are not trying to scam the system? Because we do have a lot of people that are very creative. They figure out how to get the best of the benefits. I mean, look, America has been the greatest giveaway in the world, right? But what happens to those folks that actually can't go out and work under that proposal? How do they qualify for it?
Then they qualify for Medicaid. Remember, Medicaid was for pregnant women, poor people, elderly, and the disabled. That hasn't changed. You know, I've said this, Sean, I've said it many times, that 27-year-old able-bodied adult with no dependents will no longer eat Cheetos and Mountain Dew in mom and dad's basement and be a keyboard warrior. We're missing out on their time, treasure, and talents.
But those might be the ones that are hitting the button to send SpaceX into orbit, you know what I mean, from those basements eating Cheetos and Mountain Dew, you know what I mean?
The ones that are sending SpaceX are down in Houston and other areas and Florida, making sure.
Well, maybe they're finagling the cryptocurrency, which I have no idea what.
But I want to, for your listeners, listen. Medicaid will be there for those that deserve it. We are going to remove waste, fraud, and abuse. Those three words: waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, it's a bipartisan issue to look at the bureaucracy in the federal government and make sure that the taxpayer monies is spent wisely. Both political parties understand waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, we have the Republicans today have the courage to deal with it. And there's going to be some short-term discomfort for that long-term gain.
So what are your colleagues from Minnesota? I mean, there's 8 congressional seats in Minnesota, right? Yeah. You know, you split 4-4.
Yeah.
What do they think about a lot of these changes? I mean, obviously you talk to them. Any of them have any indication that they're going to support some bipartisan stuff moving forward?
I will tell you, in private conversations I've had with my Democrat colleagues, they've said, Pete, there's some really good stuff in that reconciliation bill. Mm-hmm. They didn't commit to me that they're going to vote for it, but they've said there's some really good stuff.
Well, they're not committing like everybody else that have, and I've talked to a ton of legislatures on both sides of the aisle, and, you know, both sides said, hey, we've had private conversations. We agree on a lot of things. We disagree on certain things. But we really can't come out publicly because we don't want to get ridiculed and or retaliated from the respective leaders of the party. Is that actually going on?
It's going on in Minnesota right now. Governor Walz and the trifecta in Minnesota, the last legislative session, gave illegals free health care. It's called MinCare, free driver's license, and free college tuition. Now we're out of money. Minnesota's out of money. It was $18 billion surplus, and Walz urinated it away to a $6 billion tax increase on Minnesotans. Now it's a legislature where the Republicans, they're half and half in the House, so they have to work in a bipartisan way. Right now, Governor Walz understands we're in dire straits. He now wants to, rightfully so, kick or get rid of illegals on Medicaid in Minnesota, and his base is they're protesting him, etc. I mean, in my opinion, Governor Walz has been a really a disappointment, and that's the best I can say for Minnesota. And I will tell our listeners today that you ought to appreciate Minnesota because we took one for the team last election.
Well, I mean, look, there's no doubt that he embraced and ran with the narrative of social justice, and much to his demise. I mean, I don't think, to your point, he's very popular right now in Minnesota. I mean, when he's going out on tour in other parts of the country,
I was always taught, no matter what you're doing, make sure your home base is intact before you go out and start criticizing other people and, taking positions. And look, people may or may not like Elon Musk. I don't know the guy personally. I don't like people that cut jobs or whatever. But, with that said, embracing a stock that drops where the majority is your pension fund in Minnesota. And look, if you and our listeners should understand that pension funds are not just based upon contributions in. Pension funds are based upon investments.
Yes.
And when one of your largest investments is tanking because, there's a lot of criticism, attacks, and maybe rightfully so, and you're out there publicly cheering them on, that's your fucking pension too there, Governor.
Yeah.
That
was... He again, he's been an extreme disappointment. That when you talk about investments for the pension, Sean, you are exactly right. He was supporting the demise of Tesla on the stock market, which affected all Minnesotans that have the pension in it. So he was because he does not like Elon Musk. He said, "Well, I want that stock to go down." Little did he realize that Minnesotans, retirees in Minnesota, depended on it, and that's what's we're seeing.
Leadership would look like this: if you don't like Elon Musk, and a lot of people don't, and you don't want to invest in his stock, and you see his stock tanking, as a fiduciary of the state, wouldn't you double down and call your investment advisor and say, let's get out of that right away. Let's find a comparative stock that's going to work or an investment that's going to work to protect these pensions instead of sitting back, doing nothing, and then gloating about it. I mean, that's not fair to you must have 300,000-400,000 pensioners in Minnesota that are dependent upon those investment returns to retire with some dignity and respect. I mean, that's what a leader should have been doing, not out there in California crying about an election that he lost.
Well, listen, I'm collecting a pension that I earned as a police officer, right? And I'll be damned if I'm going to have somebody downgrade my pension or try to take it away. And that's why I'm fighting. That's why, Sean, Minnesota's 8th Congressional District is the poorest and the oldest district in Minnesota. These are blue-collar jobs that I'm fighting for, and that's why I appreciate you so much, because when you and I talk, we talk about that blue-collar family, that middle-class blue-collar family that puts on their work boots every day and brings their lunch pail. That's who I'm fighting for. That's our district, and guess what? That's who made America.
So let's talk about labor. You made a great point. We bring back all these jobs in mining and everything else. They're going to be union jobs. And that's all well and good. We can all speculate that. But the tough part of organizing companies right now and getting commitments is the broken process under the National Labor Relations Act as far as organizing. Now, we've talked about on this show many times and talked about in many different arenas, and there's been a lot of criticism because, there was a lot of talk about this Pro Act during the election, a Pro Act that wasn't bipartisan, a Pro Act that we believed that was going to be weaponized in this election so that they would put it forward. Republicans would say no, and we would get nothing out of it. When I say we, working people or people that wanted to organize. And lo and behold, when we took over 3 years ago, fortunately we were elected to take over, we recognized that we've got to work bipartisan to get legislation that's going to make it easy to organize, going to make it easier to join a union, and more importantly, it's going to make it have the ability, once they're organized, to come to a first contract as a result of arbitration or mediation. And people forget, especially on the far left, in 2008, 2009, Obama was the president, Democrat. We had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. And our biggest goal, or our biggest ask, was the Employee Free Choice Act. That didn't get done, okay? Which was basically the same as the Pro Act. Pro Act was a little bit more deeper, a lot more pages, a lot more conditions. Pro Act doesn't happen. And now we've been working bipartisan to create the Fair Labor Contract Standard legislation that I believe you are co-sponsoring.
I am, yes.
Democrat Norcross out of New Jersey, who, by the way, is a really good guy. And that's a piece of legislation. right?
So Sean, that is a big piece of legislation that the congressman and I are sponsoring. He's carrying on the Democratic side. I'm carrying on.
And you've got more Republican sponsors than Democrats.
So here's the thing. Before we talk about that, I want to just explain to your listeners.
It's our show. You can do what you want here too.
Who I am. So I organized my labor union in the Duluth Police Department. I know how I did it. I knew the time frame within getting it done. I remember calling or texting every member saying, meet me at the local restaurant at 3:00 today. They had no idea why. I needed to sign the
Isn't
card.
that hard to believe, though? Cops would meet at a restaurant or a donut shop.
There was no donuts there. What's
the Stan Makita's Donuts? Was that from Minnesota, or what show was that from?
It was Tim Hortons.
Oh, Tim Hortons. Is that in Minnesota?
No, that's Canada. But
we'll call it.
So we met, and I passed out the union cards. I said, let's do it. And the business agent that we got a hold of, he ran it down to St. Paul. He needed to get it in before 5, before they called negotiations. I knew the law. And we did it. He said, I dropped it off in St. Paul. We're good. I organized my...
So while you were doing that process, was there any type of pushback or retaliation from the command staff or Duluth politics?
So obviously, I'm protected by federal law because I organized. I can tell you that the administration in the city was not happy because it was another union they had to deal with. That wasn't my focus. So my focus was on my colleagues to get them, number one, more money, and to be fair in the contract. And we did it. As I had heard through the grapevine, they wanted to take a run at me, okay? But I knew I was federally protected.
Well, you guys were civil servants, correct?
Yes, yeah. And so we did it. And I left the Duluth Police Department better off, Sean, than when I got there because we were unionized. Their lieutenants are now being able to work overtime. That part of the contract, between $5,000 and $7,000 more a year we could make on overtime. Prior to that contract, we couldn't work
That's
overtime.
a tuition.
That's huge. And again, in northern Minnesota, that's a lot of money.
And that's because you were able to organize, you were able to negotiate terms and conditions and improve working conditions.
And we did it. And once the city of Duluth knew we weren't screwing around, they brought us to the table and we started negotiating. That's where the faster labor contract comes in. That we have, we're going to be putting out very soon, because it shouldn't take 535 days once you vote to unionize.
So let me ask you a question on that. So you were organized. You were a police officer from 1995 to 2017. You were a police officer while Janus' decision came in that basically made public sector national right to work, as far as we're concerned. And you being a pro-labor,
I do not support right to work.
No, 100%. I know you don't. What was that like when Janus came in? Did you lose anybody in your unit that didn't want to pay dues?
No, there were some rumblings about just paying their fair share and whatever. And I said, listen, if we're going to battle the administration for our job and our rights, buck up, be with us. You're not going to just pay your fair share,
right?
And we had our police officers, the vast majority of them, I mean, almost all of them understood that. And, we do not support right to work. And so.
No, I know for a fact you don't. I mean, we've had this conversation, I believe, over a cold soldier at the Delta Sky Club.
Yep.
And, right to work, it's proven that, there's diminished wages, they're distressed communities. Some of these states have bad education programs.
Well, here, Sean, when we talk about that, let's talk about Davis-Bacon.
Right. By the way, there's a concern, and we've talked to the administration about this, of the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage, and Trump administration and a lot of the Republicans are saying they want to be for working people and embrace. They want to be the party for working people. But I got to tell you, if Davis-Bacon is on the table,
it's not on the table, and it won't be on the table.
If prevailing wage is on the table, or a lot of these other previous pro-right initiatives, then it's the Republicans will lose credibility, because look, you've got 65% of working people's votes in this last election.
That's exactly
and like you have done over your last 3 or 4 elections, I would assume you want to increase the percentage and support of working people moving forward. And if any of our agenda is attacked, it's going to be a credibility issue.
So when I first got here, being the Labor Republican, we're growing our ranks, and I will submit to you, the last couple of years that the Republicans have been in control of the House, there wasn't one anti-labor amendment that made it to the House floor. It was killed in committee, and I helped lead that.
There's no doubt. We know that.
So let me say, Davis Bacon. When I tell my Republican colleagues, do you know Davis and Bacon were both Republicans, Republican senator and member of Congress, respectively? They were both Republicans. They understood the prevailing wage issue.
Pete, why let the facts get in the way of a good story?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you take a position. I'm not for national right to work, right? And, we've been able to work with a lot of Republicans to, flip them and point out why right to work is bad for the country as a national platform and why it's bad state by state. And we have been able to get people that were pro-national right to work, the Rand Paul agenda, off of that and say, look, I'm not for that. And their double down position is, let the states fight it out, which we don't agree with that either. But if that's the alternative and we're not getting attacked on a national level, and we can fight back like they did in Michigan, like we did in New Hampshire, instead of these far left progressives who are attacking me saying, what's your position on national right to work? I'm the leader of the biggest labor union in the country, the most strongest. We are not for right to work in states and nationally. But if we got to fight, I think it'd be easier to fight on a state level than it is on a national level.
Yeah. Sean, I think you're seeing we're growing the labor Republican ranks. Like when I got here, there was just a few of us. We have educated our side of the aisle, and you're seeing it. I mean, back home in a historically blue district, I'm getting record numbers. The blue collar worker has made this country. And I will just tell you that the fight's not over. I'm in the fight.
So tell us about this bill that you've co-sponsored.
So what it does is...
we're supportive of it because there's a Senate version put forth by Josh Hawley and Senator Booker out of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Isn't it ironic? 2 New Jersey Democrats are supporting the same bill.
I mean,
I like Cory Booker a lot. I mean, I gained a lot of respect from him. I got to give speeches all the time, and I, being over 50 years old, right? As you know, and you give a speech, and after 30 minutes, you got to take a bathroom break.
Yeah.
And this guy was up there for 25 hours.
I know. I don't know how we did it.
But getting back to the bill itself.
So what it does, the bill itself. For the listeners, keep it real simple. When you vote to organize, management can't wait 500-600 days. Within 130 days max, and within 10 days, they have to have that initial meeting. So this is about, the workers vote to unionize, right? They have to have that initial meeting with management within 10 days. And no longer than 130 days, that contract is signed, sealed, and delivered for the the working men and women. And that's important to me. And that is part of, when we say, when you talk about the Pro Act, that was part of the Pro Act that was important. We're taking it out. This is a good piece of legislation.
Now, what's the likelihood it's going to pass in the House?
Very likely. Very likely. I mean, we only need 218 votes, right?
Right. Yes.
We have with the growing labor Republicans, we're good.
Right. And I think, there's some concern with the bill because it didn't have all the bells and whistles that the Pro Act had. Look, what's important to us, and the Teamsters Union is a lot different than most unions, is we organize all the time, right? And
it's a high priority for the Teamsters.
Well, it's the highest priority because without growth, we die.
That's right.
And, we've organized 80,000 members in just under 3 years. And we've done most of it by avoiding the NLRB and filing for elections. We either strike for recognition, march on the boss, demand recognition. So, this is a breath of fresh air. However,
you're going to get criticized either way because it doesn't have everything that the PRO Act has. But if you got the ability to organize without retribution or retaliation, which you went through as a police officer, if you got the ability and a mandate that employers have to sit down with you in 10 days, and you've got a mandate that requires you to come to a collective bargaining agreement within 160 days. And if you can't do that, both sides can agree to extend the terms. And if you can't come to an agreement, you go to arbitration. All the while, people are still working. Goods and services are being produced.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, you can't get a contract. You do what you got to do. But there is a mechanism, a means to an end to a first contract.
Yeah.
I think the statistic that we use, and it's probably a little bit different than what you have. I think you had 465 days or 455 days is the narrative coming out of Congress. I think realistically, it takes about 405 days if you are going to get to a first contract. Now that's an if. After 365 days, that's when the assault on the workers start, with the decertifications, with the anti-worker, the union busting, who were previously in there anyways. That's when the assault starts. So just getting that mechanism of being able to get to a binding first contract through arbitration is huge, and I don't think people realize that.
By education, they're starting to realize that. And you asked me if it was going to pass. I truly believe it's going to pass. I want our listeners to understand, when I first ran for this job, I was asked by a labor group, would you walk a picket line? I said, absolutely. So my first term, we had Teamsters striking in St. Louis County, Minnesota, transportation workers, the plow drivers, wonderful men. I went up there and walked with them. I put my commitment was to them. I promised them if they struck, that I'd walk with them, and I did. And they couldn't believe it. I said, why? This is my word on you. I believe that they're going to give you a fair contract. I'm fighting with you. And those things change. People don't understand. When down in St. Paul at the refinery.
They'd understand if there was 4 feet of snow on the ground and they couldn't get to their jobs, or the kids couldn't go to school, there should be a certain appreciation, embracement of the work that these folks provide.
Yep.
And there should be a good reward.
There's another, we had a refinery issue in southern Minnesota, and I went down there with the Teamsters and walked the picket line.
Oh, that was that marathon, white collar crime syndicate. We struck them there and Detroit.
What happened was they said, Pete, when you went down there and walked that picket line, you brought every Democrat out of Minnesota to then walk the picket line, and some Republicans down there.
Know.
But it was the right thing to do. And Sean, you remember, that wasn't about wages. That was strictly about safety.
Yeah, I mean, they had, and they're prone to fires. I mean, they have their own fire department inside these refineries, and they were paid well, but it was about a condition. See, people don't realize it's not always about wages; it's about conditions.
Yep,
it's about getting home safe to your families at night.
Right.
And that was a long strike, long fought strike.
Yes, it was.
And
I was down there twice.
Yeah,
by the way.
we prevailed. But here's the funny part, right? You talk about narratives and organizing and everything else, and we'll continue on this dialogue about your bill because I think it's important for our union as well. But you talk about the election season. So we took over in March 22nd of 2022, and we vowed to be aggressive and militant, and we've been negotiating the strongest contracts, but we have been striking for recognition. We have been striking for the stronger contracts. We've had over 200 strikes in less than 3 years. And during the election, Biden walks one UAW picket line, and I'm like, where have you been for the last 200 picket lines that we have? Or where are some of these Democrats that are supposed to be supporting us? I'll give you, for example, that bill that you are very confident and we support is going to pass, we need it to pass in the House and the Senate, is extremely important for our biggest adversary, and I think it should be everybody's biggest adversary in this country, is the United States of Amazon, because they think they're the United States of Amazon. I mean, we have the ability to organize over 500,000 people that do the same job that your UPS unionized workforce does. And it just seems like, there's no support. Even the Democrats, Chuck Schumer's daughter's a lobbyist for Amazon. When we struck Amazon, which we struck them in December, we had 22 locations, over 22,000 or 10,000, I believe, DSP drivers honor our picket lines, and the same old were walking the picket lines. There was no Chuck Schumer there. There was no high-profile Gavin Newsom's out there walking right in his own backyard, and this guy is bought and paid for. But we'll get into him later. But the reality of it is, this is why this bill is so important.
It is, and it's
Amazon's our biggest threat in this country. Whether you're a working person or not, they are the biggest threat to everything that we enjoy in this country.
That the bill is the Teamsters' #1 priority, and you and I talked a while ago. I want your priority, and we're going to get it done. And I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about it. I think we have an opportunity to do some great things. And I would be remiss, and I want our listeners to know that your leadership, Sean, is recognized across the nation. In the last presidential election, you stood for the workers, whether it was Democrat or Republican. And in our private conversations, you always have talked about the blue-collar worker. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and many of us appreciate it.
Well,
You probably get a lot of grief, but I want to tell you something, that the workers across America support you and appreciate you. You are a unique leader for this time at this moment.
For our listeners, he said that exactly how we scripted it. No, I'm only kidding. I really appreciate that. But look, it's what we do. I mean, look, America was built on working people, and we've got to make sure that we protect working people. We've been attacked for the last 20 years, and we've been attacked while we've been embracing the Democratic Party. We've been making investments, right? And I always tell people, like, we're done making bad investments. We want to return our investments.
Let me tell
we
you
make an investment politically. We want to make sure that our agenda, working folks' agenda, Teamster agenda, is put forth. I don't accept, and we will not accept, hey, I'll get you next time.
No. To that point, Sean, Twin Metals, Minnesota, they're working to mine the critical minerals in the Duluth complex, what I talked about earlier in the conversation. I was at the project labor agreement signing, and I was proud to be there, and I spoke, right? The Biden administration blew that up. No mining in northeastern Minnesota. No critical minerals. Those are all union jobs.
Where do those folks go to work, though?
What's that?
Where are they going to go if they don't have jobs?
100%. So the miners in northeastern Minnesota, you can leave, for instance, Eveleth High School, and within a year making $90,000 a year without overtime in our mines. That's the jobs I'm fighting for. And when Biden put the mining ban on, it crushed us. I refuse to allow that happen to my constituents and the blue-collar worker.
So those folks you're talking about, they graduate high school, can't afford to go to college, or maybe don't want to go to college. It's a path to a career, which they're making $90,000 a year, which you assume is going to improve each year. They're going to invest in their community. They're going to buy homes, support the school system. It's a win-win all around.
They're going to have their families there, which is going to help the schools. We're going to need hospitals for them. We're going to need restaurants. We're going to need. We love our recreation. We have ATVs and boats and campers. Everything. The money spins around 4 times in our economy, and that's the importance of it. And again, when we talk about jobs, there's not a bigger proponent for mining than me in the United States Congress. I see the value in it, not only in Minnesota, Sean, but we have Alaska, Utah, Washington, North Dakota, South Dakota, Pennsylvania, Nevada.
Look at Ohio. I mean, Ohio is a hotbed.
Yes.
I mean, look how distressed, and Ohio is a great state. And it was a great state until all these bad trade deals happened, just like everybody else, like Pennsylvania and a lot of these other states. But that is a great opportunity, especially with auto manufacturing and everything else. Do you actually see this happening? Is there infrastructure being put into place right now in some of these areas, like your area and also Ohio?
In the reconciliation package, what's going to help our auto industry is you get a write off the interest on your auto loan if that automobile is domestically made. Can you imagine it? Look at just the savings on that. You buy a new automobile, you'll be able to write off your interest.
So we had Senator Marshall here last week. That's That was a little screw up with the Roger Pete thing, right? But one of his biggest initiatives is, or his legislation, I believe he might have put forward, is the elimination of taxes on overtime.
Yeah.
Now, that's going to help working people. That's going to help blue-collar people. What's your position on that?
I'm 100% behind it. I know I did some really light preliminary work on the overtime as a former police officer. That was about $1,500. Just the average overtime worker. $1,500. Sean, $1,500, and I wasn't even looking for overtime. That's the overtime from an extended shift, investigation, what have you. This no tax on tips and no tax on overtime are two very.
And that's a standalone bill, correct?
It's in our reconciliation.
Oh, it's in the reconciliation. Yeah. All right. So how does a Democrat who is saying no to everything, but has a large constituency of working folks that work 10, 15, 20 hours of overtime every week, how do they say no to that? How do they go back to their constituency and say, hey, yeah, I don't like this. I'm not voting for it?
That's a good question. They're going to have to explain to that blue-collar hourly worker why they voted to keep tax on overtime when they had the opportunity to. I know what I'm going to vote for. I'm going to vote for no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, and we're going to rectify the taxes on Social Security as well. It just doesn't fit in reconciliation. The rules don't allow it. That's why, in lieu of, there's that $4,000 tax credit at the moment. Right. We do not want tax on Social Security as well.
So we have a company called United Airlines. I think we're all familiar with them. We have 10,000 members that are airline mechanics, and what they do every single day is make sure that those big birds get in the air to transport our most precious commodity.
Yep.
Is
our people.
People, right?
Yep.
And we are in a contract battle. They haven't had a contract since 2019 because they're under the RLA, Railway Labor Act. And what they are doing, and we have the infrastructure in this country. We have infrastructure in Northern California. We've got infrastructure in Chicago. We've got infrastructure already in place in New Jersey that used to do all these big overhauls of these airplanes. And what United Airlines has been doing is shipping all that work over to China and India. And shouldn't there be tariffs and or consequences or penalties, so to speak, for not reinvesting? You're United Airlines, you're an American company. You want Americans working on your planes. And to your point earlier, when you talk about the mines, you're talking about, child labor. We don't know what the labor is over there. We don't know what the qualifications are over there. And we are transporting the most vulnerable people in the world, human beings, and we're worried about a bottom line of a balance sheet versus the safety. Why are they not being highlighted as far as you're flying all over the world, American company, and you're not allowing American mechanics to fix your planes?
It's going to take some public pressure to educate the public. When you ask any citizen in this country, would you rather have your jumbo jets repaired by an American, approved American programs, or somebody in India or Pakistan? Where would you want that jumbo jet fixed? They're going to say the United States of America. That's common sense. And I've been fighting that since I got here. That issue has come up, and it's about public pressure and making sure that number one, we protect our workers. And by the way, I've already said, when it comes to aviation safety, we have people above the wings and below the wings.
Well, that's exactly a great point, because you look at all the controversy that's been going on over the last 3 or 4 years, even before the election. You've had Boeing, which has been a disaster, right? And you've had all these issues because they didn't have qualified people work on the planes. Their checks and balances weren't there. I mean, shouldn't we be forcing these companies to invest in the best possible people to make sure above the wing and below the wing is taking care of everybody that's in between the wing and the ground?
Yeah. The answer is yes.
Right.
Unequivocally, yes.
Yep. So, what's funny is we talk about promises made, promises broken in politics. I just came from and this is funny, I just came from a rally in Chicago yesterday where the state's attorney, who was a Democrat, she was a legislature before, I think her name was Eileen Burke, if I remember correctly. And so
she represents, the prosecutors and ADAs, and they're members, the assistant attorneys, I believe, are members of Local 700 in Chicago. Well, when she was running for this position, she put out a letter, a commitment letter to all, voters that she was going to embrace a neutrality agreement, that if the prosecutors agreed, and I think there's like 740 prosecutors in Chicago, if they agreed, if she won, that she would agree to neutrality, that she would agree to negotiate in good faith and everything else. We had the letter. So she wins, and they start the organizing campaign, and guess what? She's pushing back. She's not, she's basically union busting. So, we have an actual piece of paper that says that. How do you regain your credibility when you're trying to, especially in light of what's going on in politics right now?
Yeah.
That's another knock on the Democratic Party. I mean, you look at Chicago's pretty controversial right now, right, with the mayor, and also Illinois with the governor. How do you walk back from that position when you put it in writing?
I not only put it in writing, but you say it. In politics, all we have is our word. In life, all we have is our word. And people see that when you break your word, they see that. If you got time, I'll just
We have all the time in the world.
Give you a quick example. My word is my word. People that know me understand that. I was on patrol in the patrol squad car, and I pull up to this car. It was one occupant, driver's seat, and I walked up to the window. It was rolled down about 2 inches, and it was like Cheech and Chong, the smoke coming out of there, right? And I said, "What are you doing?" And nothing. And I said, "If you give me the dope you have, I'm not going to charge you." He gave me a big bag. And I had to go to my sergeant. I said, "I'm not charging him. This is going to be destroyed into evidence, and then it'll be destroyed." He says, "No, we have to charge him." I said, "Sergeant, I told him on a traffic stop that I wasn't going to charge him. If you force me to, and it goes to trial, I am going to go on the stand and say I told the suspect that if he gave it to me, I wasn't going to charge him." And lo and behold, the sergeant said, "You're right. We're going to destroy it." That's my word.
Right.
That is my word. And when the
Hence, right now it's legal in most states.
Yeah. But I mean, back then it wasn't. And
Right.
and Sean, that's why I said, when the Teamsters asked me during the election, "Would you walk a picket line?" I said, "Yes. I've done it twice."
So are you going to support the legalization of cannabis nationwide?
So that's a great question. So from my law enforcement perspective, okay, I have issues with it, major issues with it. And I'll give you an example. So when I was a police officer, as a community officer in my hometown, was in the eastern part of Duluth, Sean, there were 4 individuals that were troublesome for me. They were, into marijuana, etc. I knew who they were. I went to all 4 parents. I said, "Just to let you know, little Johnny's using, and we have evidence that he's dealing." I would probably deal with that. Within 8 years, actually 7 years, 3 of them died of an overdose, and 1 cleaned up his act. I saw in real time that those individuals, the marijuana didn't do it for them. They had to increase. And so I saw what it did. From a police standpoint, I am at this moment against it. For medicinal purposes, PTSD, we're seeing some positive effects, yes, but I just don't. I mean, Sean, we have your Teamsters. They got to be sound mind when they're delivering, right?
Well, so that's a great point, because a lot of people don't know this, but we are actively organizing in the cannabis industry. And, it's very controversial in certain areas, but anybody that's covered under the DOT rules and regulations, they're mandatory drug testing. So, they can't utilize marijuana or anything else. I will say this. and I've never done a drug in my life because
Me either.
I would probably love them, but I'll drink a couple beers. But you know, we get back to the working side of the industry. I mean, it's coming. It's legal in, I think, 27 states. There's a big support, I believe, to legalize it nationwide. And whether we agree with it or not, we can say the same about alcohol, right? Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of deaths because of alcohol, drunk driving, domestics, all this stuff. So alcohol is kind of, you could have that same argument, and that's the way we look at it. And, you know, we've done some research, and there's more violent crimes as a result of alcohol. And then there's the debate of whether cannabis is a gateway drug or not a gateway drug. I think if you're going to do drugs and you're really committed to it and it's an addiction, a disease, you're going to accelerate that whether marijuana is there or not. I know for us, our perspective on it are the folks that are cultivating it, warehousing it, and distributing it. And they're going to be working once it's legalized for, you know, private equity who's only going to care about the bottom line of their balance sheet. So there is a 500,000 person workforce that we look at as we can actually improve the lives and create a career path to you know, an industry that is legalized now, just like alcohol was. So, you know, there's a debate on each side, but we're focused on the workers that are there right now. And believe me, I get it. I mean, you don't start doing fentanyl day one, right? You start, you know, drinking, you start doing marijuana.
And I saw it as a police officer.
Yeah,
I saw it. I saw what both drugs and alcohol did, and how they affected families, broke up families, people lost their jobs and what have you. I will just say this, that real simple. If you are a family, you spouse, you're driving on a 2-lane highway in your family van, the oncoming vehicle coming your way, do you want them higher than a kite or as sober as can be as they're passing you by 60 miles an hour?
That's easy.
Yeah, and so if we can eliminate that, we can save lives. So I know that you and I are going to differ on that. I just come from the perspective.
But again, this is a perfect example. We can have a difference of opinion, right? And not throw the relationship away.
We agree on 95% of the other stuff.
There's no doubt. You know, it's funny because, you know, you hear the pros and cons of marijuana, and, you know, you see the effects of alcohol on families, and you're like, look, we don't want someone in a car smoking pot driving down the highway. You know, we would assume there'd be regulations similar to what alcohol is. You're not supposed to drive, be under the influence in driving. So, you know, hopefully a lot of that stuff can be worked out and put at ease. But talking about policing, police officer, you saw a lot over your career, right? You saw the support of the public switch from pro cop, which I'm pro cop. I mean,
I know you are.
I'm pro cop, even though I've been chased by, like, I think every branch of law enforcement at some point in time.
I tell you what,
right?
Sean, to that point, that's why I know you're pro cop, and that's why when Tim Walz calls our ICE agents the Gestapo, who are trying to get murderers and people that have killed people in DWI crashes, when he calls our law enforcement men and women Gestapo, that infuriates me. Every law enforcement officer that I have talked to since is furious with him.
Well, how about, you know, illegals in this country, right, that are raping and trafficking boys and girls? Like, is that acceptable? Like, they shouldn't even be exported. They should be tried in the middle of the street in front of everybody. I mean, if that happened, God forbid, to some of these, and we don't wish that on anybody, to some of these left wing nuts, I think they'd have a difference of opinion on what goes on. I mean, we've got an obligation to protect everybody in this country.
Let me tell you something. I gave Lake and Riley's mother a hug, and she said, I'll never forget this. I just wish I could hug my daughter one more time. She never had the chance. Right?
As a parent, isn't that your biggest fear?
It's awful.
And how do you criticize?
And it didn't have to happen, Sean.
No, and how do you criticize, you know, law enforcement from getting violent, illegal people off the street who the intention, and I think we agree on this, I'm all for immigrants. I'm all for a naturalization process. I'm a product of immigration.
We have legal immigration, absolutely.
And I have a major issue with people defending child molesters and rapists who are here illegally in the United States. It's a disgrace.
Yep.
And I just don't know why people, and, you know, I was telling this story recently, I forget where it was, but, you know, burning and desecrating monuments and flags in the United States. You know, I got in a debate with someone one time that said, well, the Supreme Court says that it's not a crime. I said, it might not be a crime because of the Supreme Court. But don't you think morally there's something wrong when you're living in the greatest country in the world with all the freedoms in the world and opportunity, and you're going to desecrate our most sacred flag?
Yeah.
Something's wrong with that picture, you know? Getting back to police, you know, there's been a lot of chirping online, and I know everything online is 100% accurate and true, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So there's been a lot of chirping about the officer from Minnesota, Chauvin, who there was speculation he was going to get pardoned. Do you think that actually is going to happen?
No. The president, his administration in March said it's not going to happen.
Okay.
I've been asked.
Why is that coming up?
I have no
now?
idea.
Have you seen it as well?
Yeah, people have asked me.
Right.
I've said, no idea where are you getting this information from. But
Should he be pardoned?
Well, I will tell you that as you look into that case, the training officer in the Minneapolis Police Department, it was proven that she didn't speak accurately in her testimony about the training techniques.
Right.
That
the choking and the knee on the throat. Yeah.
And so I can tell you that it happened in the great state of Minnesota, unfortunately. And we have a police officer license that I was a former holder as a police officer. We go through extensive training to become police officers in the great state of Minnesota. And, you know, to have this incident happen in Minneapolis but when you talk about law enforcement, if you look at what Minneapolis has done and the damage that they have done to law enforcement, the people leaving Minneapolis, we have a Hennepin County attorney that tried to take a run at a trooper for using legal force against a suspect. She tried to fire him. I led the charge, and many others led the charge against her. She ended up dropping the charges against this cop. I tell you what, defund the police. We need to defend the police. The defund the police movement has affected, Sean, law enforcement for a generation.
It's a disgrace.
The recruitment, retention, morale, and we've lost a lot of great cops. They say, we're done.
So in Boston, I have a lot of friends that are Boston police officers. Boston cops, once all this the Black Lives Matter happened, the protesting what happened, all the attacks on police officers happened. I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, 26 Boston police officers resigned from their jobs and took jobs, went through another academy to be firefighters in the city of Boston because everybody loves firefighters. And because of such a negative attack on the police, of defunding the police and everything else. But, you know, hopefully that's switching and that worm is turning a little bit because, look, you always have great cops and you always have 2 or 3% everywhere you go in every workforce. That could be a problem. But, you know, there is some semblance of law, whether you're in the worst community or the best community, once you have police that are supported by their communities. And look, we didn't always agree with police officers growing up, but you knew there were checks and balances and there was law and order.
There's the police profession, it's an honorable and it's full of integrity. Let me tell you that right now. And the law enforcement men and women in this country need our support. We want to hold them accountable, okay? But they have to make split-second decisions. They leave their families, just like many of us. They don't get to, quote, not answer a call that comes across the radio. They have to go, and we hope that we've given them all the tools of training and techniques, technology to make sure that they return safe. Just last week was Police Week in our nation's capital. That is a very special week for me. And unfortunately, 3 Minnesota cops and 1 paramedic didn't make it home during 2 separate incidents. It's uncalled for. I spoke to one of the mothers.
Yeah, there's no one highlights when a cop gets killed.
No, let me tell you something. No, I talked to Matt Ruge's mother. He lost his life in the line of duty. He's a hero for the Burnsville police department. So is Paul Armstrong, Jamal Mitchell in Minneapolis, a fire paramedic, Adam Finseth. They were doing what they were called to do. The fact of the matter is, if we don't start supporting our law enforcement and what have you, we are gonna end up in a society that we don't recognize. The men and women in law enforcement are our last line of defense.
Well, I think it goes deeper too. You know, you're out there, and this is no disrespect, but law enforcement is on the front line, and you are making judgment calls. You are making arrests based upon you're reactionary to what a lot of these people are doing.
Yep.
And that's one aspect of it. But when it gets to a level where the prosecution needs to take over, I think the prosecutors need to support the police in their actions more than anybody.
That's part of the conversation. When you have police officers across this nation putting bad guys and gals in jail, and before the end of the shift they're out, or within 24 hours they're out, they're violent, and they perpetuate the crimes again and again. That's where the morale within law enforcement, much of it comes from. They're doing their job, they're risking their lives, and all of a sudden the prosecutors and judges give them a slap on the hand. Hey, we have law and order for a reason. The number one priority, Sean, for any community is community safety, and the men and women in the blue and brown will do that. Let them do their jobs. But you're right. You bring a great point. We have to have the judges and the prosecutors on board as well. So these violent criminals don't offend. That's why what ICE is doing right now, they're taking the worst first, the worst offenders that they know. They're going and getting them wherever they are. You are a violent criminal. We got 5,000 convicted murderers that walked right through our open southern border that are in this country now. Tom Holman said to us specifically, those are our priorities. We are not going to take murderers and rapists in this country. No American is going to be another victim.
Yeah, he has some great sound bites when he speaks to the media. I mean, you know, especially when the Pope, who recently passed away, criticized him, and he was like, he should worry about the Vatican. Yeah. I mean, it's just the one-liners. But, you know, I think he's a person that's pretty passionate about what he's doing. So one other thing I don't think people realize is that you and the commander-in-chief have something in common outside of affiliations. Yeah. You were shot in the line of duty.
Yeah, it was actually off duty.
Oh, off duty?
So I was off duty. It was December of 1995. And
first year on the job, right?
What's that?
First year on the job?
Second year. Yeah, it was within the first year. That's right. I was, because I was still in field training. An individual shot through my windshield. The bullet struck me in the head, ricocheted, tore the carpeting or the material on the roof of the pickup truck. It spun around. The bullet landed at my fiance at the time, her feet. And I didn't know originally what had happened. I thought like a rock hit or something. Until I looked in the mirror and blood was coming down. And I told my fiance, I said, Jody, I've been just shot. Let's get out of here.
So do you think that's a result of developing such a hard cranium from playing hockey?
Tom Emmer would say that.
most people don't realize you were a Division I college hockey star.
Yeah.
You played in the AHL for several years
with Detroit,
before you became a law enforcement person.
I'm very, number one, I'm very blessed. The things that I've set out to do in my life, I've been able to accomplish. A lot of hard work. Nothing was given to me, right? Nothing was given to me. But when you come from Minnesota, you yearn to play Division I hockey, and I earned an athletic scholarship at a little university in Michigan.
But you won the national championship.
We won the Division I national championship.
There was controversy on your goal, wasn't there?
No.
Not in your eyes, right?
Not in my eyes.
You won that goal. That was a goal. It was fair and square. You didn't knock the goalpost off a little bit?
No, I don't think I did.
Is there video of that? Can we pull that up? Can we pull that up to get confirmation?
You owe me 2 beers for that one.
I'm going to owe you 4 beers.
It was, in 88, we won the national championship. We beat another small school at St. Lawrence University out of Canton, New York, and overtime. And that win gets bigger and bigger every year as you get older. You realize,
hockey players are crazy, right?
Well, some of them.
I mean, I have one. He's 21 years old. He's playing at Suffolk University. And I'll tell you, hockey players are the toughest athletes in the country. I mean, but
the one thing about hockey players, and I talk about this all the time, which I think is extremely important in life, is you think about it, you're in a locker room with your peers from 4 years old till whenever you're done playing.
18
with no coaches and no parents. And if you can learn to survive in that locker room with the ridicule and the shit talking that's being done. And my kid, when I remember like 6 or 7 years old, I'm standing outside the locker room and I hear the shit talking that's going on. As a parent, I should have went in there and said, hey, enough's enough, because the coaches weren't in there. But I'm like, you know what? This might build some character. It's really not that bad. So I get him in the car driving home. And I said, hey, what do you guys talk about in the locker room? And he turned red. I go, did you guys swear in the locker room? And he was turning red. But I tell you, hockey players are tough. And I think that's a sport where you carry that discipline, you carry that tenacity, and you carry that work ethic, because most hockey players come from blue-collar backgrounds.
Again, I couldn't have said it as good as you just did. I would tell you that I use what I learned in hockey almost every day in my life. And most importantly, in Washington, on Capitol Hill here. When you want to get a piece of legislation across the finish line, there's noise left and right, up and down. You have to focus on that legislation and why it's good, and help educate your colleagues, no matter what the headlines are.
And you got a stick handle around a few roadblocks that come in your way as well.
Yeah, we call it stick handling in a phone booth.
Right.
There's some tricky situations, but if you're able to really educate the person or an opponent on why you think it's good, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity.
What does the future hold in politics for you?
So if you'd have told me, Sean, 8 years ago that, Pete, you would be a member of Congress, you'd be leading on the natural resources space and the mining space and law enforcement space, I would have said no. I said I was a county commissioner, working in the Duluth Police Department. I was living that American dream. I loved it, helping people. But the calling to help people, this is why I'm here. This is not a career for me. This is my passion. My career was professional hockey, small business, and police. Okay.
Right.
I've got 6 children. My youngest are 3 and 4. My wife and I adopted them just a couple of years ago, and it's not easy right now. My wife is a saint to allow me to represent 776,000 people. It's a balance act, but again, this is the passion I have. This is not a career. I made a speech about 4 years ago. And at that speech, I said, I'm not going to be here in 20 years, And my chief of staff afterwards said, Pete, never say that. And I looked at her, I said, Desiree, I'm not going to be here in 20 years. The founding fathers never meant this to be permanent. Go do what you can with the passion you have in Washington, and then get back to the real world.
I think that's a great attitude, because, you look at it and you say, hey, I'm not going to be here forever, but while I'm here, I want to make the biggest difference for the most important people. Those are the people that I'm paid to represent, without no individual agenda. We can't say the same for certain people that are still there right now. Right. And I'll just say their initials, Schumer and Pelosi. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's a pretty noble opinion and noble plan to have. Because, look, there comes a time in your life, whatever you're doing, when you're not effective anymore, you've got to have some dignity and self-respect and walk away on top. So
I've always thought it's not a career, and there was a piece of legislation that I was just thinking about. It's not. We haven't even written it, and we won't write it. But I just thought maybe
we won't tell anybody either.
No, but I just thought it would be really nice to have a piece of legislation, something like public elected leaders ought not serve indefinitely.
Yeah, I know that's someone's name that I just mentioned, right? No, I get it. But listen, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I appreciate all the work you do on behalf of working people, and I look forward to working extremely close with you and like-minded people, regardless of political affiliation, to get things done on behalf of American workers in this country.
Thanks for having me on. This is a privilege and a pleasure, and we'll do it again. And to your listeners, thanks for spending some time with me.
You're welcome back anytime, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.